Scope refers to the range which can be accessed by given variable. So if we have defined a variable in a function, then the scope of that particular variable would be within that function. Or if we have defined a variable outside a function, then it will be a global variable. So let's see this through an example. Here we have defined a variable x which is outside a function. So this would be a global variable. Then we have defined same variable x within the function scope check, and this would be a local. Now, if we were to call scope check and then we will print x, what do you think would be the value? So let's see how the flow will go. Scope check will call this particular definition and the value 10 would be assigned to x. After that, when we will call x, what do you think? Will the output be 10 or 100? The output would be 100 because this variable x is not accessible beyond this particular definition. So when we are calling x, by default we are calling this x, which is 100. So let's run to understand this. So you can see the output is 100, not x. Now, suppose we want to call function y. So in this case, we have not defined y beyond the scope of this function. Now, if we try to call this particular variable, we want to refer to it, it will simply throw an error. The reason being y is not defined outside this particular definition. So its scope is local. It cannot be accessed beyond this function. However, we can always refer to a global variable into a local definition, but not the other way around. We cannot refer this local variable outside it. So for example, in the next code, you can see we have a global variable x, which we are referring into a local definition. Now, if we were supposed to call a scope check, then it will not throw any error. The reason being this x, because by its definition it's global, it can always be accessed within this function. Okay. Now, if we were to access this element and also change it, what will happen? So by definition, a global variable can be accessed within a local definition. But what if we also try to change it there? So suppose we have a local global variable 100 here, then we are trying to add 10 over it. And then if we call this function, it's going to throw an error because this is not allowed. Let's run the code. It will say unbound local error because that's true also, right? Otherwise, if a local it has been changed locally, then how will other functions access to it? Like, how will we know when you are changing it whether it is for the local or whether it's for the global scope? So in such a case, we will use keyword global. If we really want to make a change to a global variable within a local definition, then first we will declare it global using global keyword, and then we can always run it. So as you can see, now it's not going to throw any error because now the function knows that it is allowed, it is intentional that we are making changes to this global variable. So with that, I hope the scope is clear to you. It's going to be really very important when you are working with functions in Python or any other language, because if you know what is the possible scope, what is the expected scope of a variable you define and use it in the same scope, you will never face any errors. Okay, with that, now let's move on to modules.